This TFMR podcast is brought to you by your friends at JM Bullion. Visit jmbullion.com for all your gold and silver bullion needs. Hello again from TF Metals Report, and welcome back to your podcast highlights for the week of August 14th through the 18th. If you are a regular listener to these podcast highlights, you know we keep an eye on the dollar index every single day. And we've been following it in a very well-defined downtrend since November of last year. However, as the week began on Monday the 14th, it looks like maybe the dollar's trying to break out of that downtrend and move higher. Now, you got to be cautious. It looked like the dollar was breaking down just a month ago. So it could also have a false breakout here over the next few days. But again, back on Monday, it was breaking out, and that was a big topic of discussion in our Monday podcast. Here's your dollar chart. Again, we've been tracking this. This goes all the way back. I guess it's not the 1st November. 1st November is about when the dollar peaked out. Once it fell below 108 and then couldn't get back above 108, you start there in late November, and you can see how perfectly this tracks until today. Now again, no trend line goes to zero. No uptrend goes to infinity. They're all made to break eventually. But gosh, it sure looks like we were breaking down just a month ago, and now we've done nothing but go up ever since. This is why this stuff will just drive you crazy sometimes. Remember, that dollar index only compares the U.S. dollar to a basket of other quickly devaluing fiat currencies. One of those currencies in that basket is the Japanese yen. And the Japanese yen versus the dollar is getting to a point where last year the Bank of Japan had to act to defend it, buy yen, and try to strengthen it. If they were to do that again, that would probably put a short-term top in the dollar index, strengthen the yen, weaken the dollar. So on Tuesday the 15th, we took a look at the chart of the Japanese yen, the USD-JPY, to see if it could tell us anything about the future. But think of a stronger yen meaning a weaker dollar. Now, the yen is an eighth of the dollar index, something like that, so it's not perfect. But again, think of a stronger yen as a weaker dollar. So what I've plotted here in your final chart, again, thinking that if the yen gets to 150 again, that the Bank of Japan's going to intervene and try to shove it back down. Okay? Stronger yen, weaker dollar. And as you can see on this chart, this goes back, almost 20 years. See how the dollar yen, see how that's falling and getting stronger between 2007 and 2012? That means, again, the dollar is getting weaker. And as the dollar is getting weaker and the yen's getting stronger between 2008 and 2012, look how gold did. Okay? Then beginning in 2012, look at the yen getting weaker, the blue line moving up. That means the dollar is getting stronger. And what does gold do? Tanks, right? Then they all chop around sideways into 2019. Once again, the yen gets stronger. The dollar yen is going down. And what does gold do? It takes off. Okay, and then you can see the opposite. If I were to give you another second chart just the last couple of years, you can see this on that as well. What I'm getting at, again, this isn't perfect. However, there may be a moment that's coming soon where that dollar yen gets backed up to 150 again, like it did last fall. Remember when gold was banging around at 1,600, then suddenly it turned around and started moving higher? Right. Part of that component was the yen getting stronger, the dollar yen going down. That meant the dollar was going down and gold caught a bid. And again, this is kind of the historical representation of all that, okay? So this is something that we'll be watching through the remainder of this month, through Jackson Hole and into September. What happens when the dollar yen gets to 150 again? And if the Bank of Japan intervenes and starts buying it, that could be a very nice signal for a low for gold. Besides the gold charts and the silver charts at TFMR, we also follow all sorts of markets and keep track of all sorts of headlines. So in our podcast of Wednesday the 16th, we discussed a couple of tweets from my friend Steph Pomboy. In fact, Steph's going to be the Thursday conversation guest at TF Metals Report next week. I'd invite you to stop by my site on Thursday. It's public audio. Anybody can listen to it. I'm sure you're going to want to hear from Steph. She's very sharp. As you can see in this series of tweets about the retail sales report that was trumpeted earlier in the week as Robust economy for the U.S. Strong U.S. economy. Well, maybe not so fast. Steph knows this better than just about anybody. I look forward to talking to her next week. But it was part of our discussion on Wednesday the 16th. Speaking of seasonal adjustments and distractions and headline numbers, Steph Pomboy all over the bullshit of yesterday's retail sales numbers that were used to club the metals and spike the dollar. For those curious as to why he's banging on about retail sales, seasonal adjustments, read this. Last July, retail sales fell at a nominal number of $8 billion, but it was reported as $6 billion because they seasonally adjusted higher. That implies that the seasonal adjustment was $2 billion. But this July, as she continues, the seasonal adjustment was $8 billion. What? Again, by the time these are revised lower, nobody will care. The bang for the buck was put out there. Oh, look how strong and robust. Buzz the field. Unbelievable. Just like everything else. Just like home sales today. Just like the BLSBS. Everything is massaged and seasonally adjusted and birth-death adjusted to create this mope, this image that everything's fine so that hopefully everybody will just go along with it and keep everything going when, again, at some point we're going to have to pay the piper. As you know, we are in the dog days and the summer doldrums. That period in August happens every year. U.S. traders trying to sneak in one last vacation before the kids go back to school. European traders all on what they call holiday, sunning themselves at the south of France. Makes for a very light volume but volatile trade where the computers are fully in charge. Pre-programmed algorithms don't take a holiday. And so when, during COMEX hours, the algos see higher interest rates and or a rising dollar, they react almost reflexively by selling and shorting the COMEX precious metals. You can see that in this chart that we discussed on Thursday the 17th. About 12 out of the last 20 days have had massive COMEX selling. That's been the culprit of the near $100 loss we've had over the last month. Selling on COMEX by the machines, responding to higher rates and a higher dollar. We'll see that reflected in the Commitment of Traders report this week. We'll also see it setting everybody up for a short squeeze once we get into September. All right, I wanted to show you this. Again, this has been mainly a U.S. COMEX futures-based sell-off. Again, you can see these periods when prices have tried to recover, and most of them are during the Asian and London sessions, if you can believe that. Look at all these red arrows. This is 20 days, actually almost a full month. Yeah, 20 days or so of 2-hour candlesticks. I put the little red arrows pointing at the 6 to 8 a.m. Central Time 2-hour period on each of these days, for each of these days. Not every single one, but most of them. Okay? And what happens between 6 and 8 o'clock? That's the COMEX Open. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, what is that? 13 out of 20 or 21 have been COMEX-driven sell-offs. And again, it's not so much the rascally bankers smashing with brand new shorts. The bankers, as you know, are covering shorts. It's the specs who are dumping, and it's the specs who are getting short. And it's their machines that pick up on these cues during U.S. market hours of higher rates and a higher dollar, and they dump and they short. And you can see that displayed for you in all its glory on this chart. On Friday, August the 18th, the dog days of summer continue. Very boring markets for the precious metal controlled by the algorithms. Let's talk about something more positive. You may have noticed the silver actually was flat this week, up a couple of pennies at the end of the week. Why is that? Well, while silver's price has been plunging over the last couple of weeks, the banks have been covering shorts and getting long, while the hedge funds have been dumping longs and getting short. This is a very bullish development for silver. This happened 4 times late last year, and each time silver responded with a very short but violent squeeze. Also kept price from going much lower as well. If you understand that the banks manipulate and manage the price, and if the banks are getting long, then it's pretty doubtful price is going to go much lower. As you can see on your final slide of the week, your Commitment of Traders report that came out Friday afternoon reveals this. The swap dealing banks now net long about 6,000 contracts, while the hedge funds are net short nearly 6,700. That's the most bullish positioning we've had in silver in that regard since March the 17th. And back then, silver was getting ready to roll about $4 higher in a month. So keep an eye on silver next week with Powell at Jackson Hole, and then the week after that, we'll have the latest jobs report. Silver's ready to roll and pop higher. It just needs the dollar to ease back and maybe some buying in the bond market. Once that happens, this latest low will be in and price will get squeezed higher. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy these TF Metals Report podcast highlight summaries. If you want a podcast every day, just join us at TFMR. It's only $15 a month, or about 50 cents per day. Go to tfmetalsreport.com for more details. Have a great weekend.